The Northerner, Episode 2. The Father's Shadow. Alhaji strolled into my office without so much as a salam or a knock. I didn't blink anymore at his informal ways. By now, I was used to the whirlwind. That was Alhaji Aiji. His towering presence seemed to suck the air out of the room, and I rose from my chair out of habit, standing stiffly as he came barreling toward me. His round, jovial face beamed with a smile so big it nearly pushed his plump cheeks into his eyes. "Sayeed, my boy, you did it again." He threw his arms around me, engulfing me in his usual bear hug, before swinging me left and right in his excitement. "That's why I never doubted you. You, my boy, are a man of your word." The force of his embrace had me staggering for a second, but I quickly composed myself. I wasn't the smiling type, but Alhaji had a way of making his good mood infectious. No matter how cold I tried to remain, something about his exuberance softened me, and against my better judgment, I found myself smiling, albeit briefly. I finally managed to extricate myself from his hold, but Alhaji didn't even notice. He was still chattering away, gesturing animatedly with his hands, causing his expensive Barbariga to ripple and shake like a sail in the wind. His wide gestures and jiggling guts made him look like a fat toddler mid-laugh. Watching him like this always amused me. Alhaji was like a whirlwind of energy and charisma. His big personality was both his charm and his weapon. He had an uncanny ability to pull people into his orbits. His charm worked so well, people seldom questioned the real man behind that smile. Most people saw the happy-go-lucky, benevolent businessman. They didn't see the man who had climbed his way out of poverty with bloodied hands. They didn't know he was the most successful human trafficker in Nigeria. His influence stretching across borders, his wealth builds on the shattered lives of the girls he sold. But I knew I had seen it all. Yet, to me, Alhaji Idi Garba Aiji was more than the ruthless kingpin people would recoil from if they knew his truth. To me, he was a father. He might not have been my father by blood, but he raised me since I was a boy. He gave me every luxury I could ask for, molded me into the man I am today, and introduced me as his son to anyone who asked. So yes, people might call him evil if they knew what he did behind closed doors. But to me, he was everything, and I owed him my loyalty unquestionably. "What got you so happy this early?" I asked after he had settled down a bit. "Oh, don't be so modest, my boy." Alhaji's grin stretched even wider. "I heard we have 30 girls for the auction this year." 30. Can you believe it? I knew you were the right person for the job. I said it, didn't I? Now, all those doubters can eat their words. We've never had this many before. He grabbed my shoulder again, giving it a congratulatory squeeze, his eyes gleaming with excitement. I was used to his praise, but I wanted to move on to wherever business brought him here this morning. "It's not a big deal, Alhaji. The insurgency worked in our favor. That's all." Alhaji waved a dismissive hand. Ba haka bane. If it hadn't been for your idea, no one would have thought to disguise our operation as the terrorists doing. We snatched 15 girls from that college, and the authorities still think it was the insurgent. You are brilliant, son. Just like we only got away with it because those terrorists had kidnapped schoolgirls a few months back. People still remember it, and using the same tactics was the easiest way to throw off suspicion. I tried to deflect the praise, eager to get back to the real issue. Alhaji shook his head, still beaming. "You are too humble. Face mask, face guns, and a little fear. Those students thought they were being attacked by insurgents, and we got 15 girls with no fuzz. You saved us time and money. You are a genius." I gave a brief nod, hoping he would move on. He loved to shower me with praise, but I wasn't one for compliments. I only wanted to focus on the business. Ever since Alhaji handed over the day-to-day operations of this side of the business to me, he had been focusing more on the legitimate phase of his empire, IG Group of Industries. He rarely showed up at my office unless something important was brewing. He finally patted my shoulder one last time before taking a seat, his Barbariga flowing around him like a royal robes. "I need you to go down to the warehouse and inspect the girls. Pick the ones you know will fetch the highest price. We've got a European buyer this year. He's interested in a few of them and has offered a price we can't refuse. I gave him your number, so expect a call. He knows you're the one running things now. I stiffened at the mention of the girls. I had always tried to distance myself from that part of the business. Handling the logistics and strategies was one thing, but I never dealt with the merchandise directly. The sight of those girls, their eyes wide with terror and despair, was something I avoided at all costs. But this time, I had no choice. Alhaji had tasked me with the selection, and I never said no to him. I know you don't like handling the merchandise, but I need you to pick the top sellers. Those clients are new, and we need to impress them. No leftovers. I trust you, Sayeed. Don't let me down. With that, he stood up and walked out, his barbariga blowing behind him like a cape. I walked him to the door, my mind already weighing the task ahead. As much as I wanted to stay away from the girls, Alhaji's words echoed in my head. Don't let me down. The warehouse was a place I avoided. I knew that went on there, but I kept myself detached from it, focusing on the business side of things instead. Today, however, I had to step into that world. As I approached the cold, still doors of the warehouse, a sour taste rose in my throat. The inside was dimly lit, a stark contrast to the building sunlight outside. My eyes adjusted slowly, and as the figures of the girls came into focus, I felt a tightening in my chest. They were huddled together, chained in groups, their eyes wide with fear, some swollen with tears. I quickly looked away. I hated seeing the despair, the helplessness. It was easier to deal with numbers and logistics than with human faces. A girl caught my eye. She was different from the others, taller, maybe older, with a defiant look in her eyes. Unlike the rest, who were cowering or crying, she met my gaze head on, her chin raised in silent resistance. Something about her made my stomach turn. She reminded me of someone from my past, long buried beneath the layers of who I had become. I quickly looked away. I forced myself to walk among them, evaluating their physical appearance, strength, and the potential they held for fetching high prices. I hated this part, but Alhaji's voice was in my head and I couldn't afford to fail him. My hands shook slightly as I noted down which ones would bring in the highest bids. As I walked past the girl with the defiant gaze, I paused. Her eyes bored into me, as though she knew something about me that even I was trying to forget. For a brief moment, I hesitated, but then I forced myself to look away. This was business. Sentiment had no place here. I finished my inspection quickly, my heart heavy as I left the warehouse. Outside, I inhaled the fresh air, trying to cleanse the darkness that clung to me. This task had been harder than I thought, but there was no turning back. I was too deep into this world to escape it. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. The European buyer had texted. It was time to seal the deal. Alhaji trusted me to handle this, and I wouldn't let him down. Still, as I drove away, the image of the defiant girl stayed with me. Her eyes seemed to follow me, a silent reminder of the life I had chosen and the price I would eventually have to pay.